title is not wrong. This is how Bulgaria became one of the most, if not the most, powerful country in Europe. To understand this, we need to go back to the early 500s. In the 500s, there was the Eastern Roman Empire, who had split off from Rome a century ago. Jordanes and Procopius were of Germanic and Greek descent, respectively, and they both started the first Slavic migrations into the Balkans, the Slavs being an Indo-European group. Procopius describes the Slavs who were Ante and Sclaveni as barbarians with ancient institutions and traditions, not united by a single leader but living under a democratic system. Before you get confused, the Ante was an East Slavic group who lived around modern Moldova, Ukraine, and southern Russia. The Sclaveni were a South Slavic group who lived near the Ante in Poland and Ukraine. The Eastern Roman Emperor, Maurice, calls them unorganized and leaderless. Procopius says that the Slavs are henotheistic, meaning that they believed in one god, and that god was the god of lightning, Peru. The first recorded raid by the Slavs was in 518, performed by the Ante and written down by Procopius. This raid was also at the same time of a rebellion, the Vitalian Revolt. The raid was ended, however, by a future emperor's cousin, Germanus, who was the cousin of Justinian. Another raid during the early 530s by the Sclaveni ended up killing the general Chilbudius. Another raid during 533 and 545, the Ante were recorded to have raided the Thracian region of Rome. This raid was so bad for Rome that they started to pay the Ante in gold, and gave them some land north of the Danube, even despite the divide and conquer tactics used against the two Slavic groups. The Ante became mercenaries for Rome, and conducted attacks for Rome against the Turkic Khazars, Avars, and Bulgars. Even the Slavic Sclaveni weren't safe. One of these raids was so bad to the Avars that they ended up destroying the Ante in 602 and removing them from sources in history. Even though the Ante became friends of Rome and enemies of the Avars, the same was not true for the Sclaveni. The Sclaveni continued to raid Roman territory, even getting close to the city of Thessaloniki at one point. However, they were stopped by the general Germanus again. The Sclaveni allied themselves with the Avars after they defeated the Ante at the Black Sea Steppe in 558. The alliance broke after the Avars demanded control over the Sclaveni, and the leader of the Slavs, Terentius, said no. The Avar Khan, Bayan, campaigned into Sclaveni territory with Byzantine help in 578, burning down many settlements in the process. The Sclaveni did the same to Thrace in the same year. The Ante, the Avars, the Sclaveni, and the Romans would keep fighting each other until the Byzantine Sassanid War of 602 to 628. Without the Ante to stop the Sclaveni started to fully invade and settle in the Balkans by 615. The Slavs and the Avars teamed up once again to siege Thessaloniki and Constantinople with the Persians. However, both of these sieges failed. The Slavs stayed in the Balkans, and the tribes in Bulgaria/Thrace became known as the Seven Slavic Tribes. These seven Slavic tribes consisted of Moravians, Ante, Branchvechi, Sclaveni, Timochani, and Odobrite. However, it is unclear who they were, and these are the most likely suggestions. Now that we have established that the Slavs settled Bulgaria by the 7th century, we will bring our attention to the Turkic Bulgars, the people that Bulgaria is named after. Turkic people now are the Turkish, Kazakhs, Uzbeks, and many more. But back then, there were another group, the Bulgars. The first written records of the Bulgars date back to 480 CE, when they allied and helped the Byzantine Emperor Zeno against the Germanic Ostrogoths. The Bulgars were made out of three main Turkic people, the Utigurs, the Onagurs, and the Kuchugurs. The Bulgars were said to have migrated from Siberia to the Pontic steppe during the 5th century. From there, after the Ostrogoths left for Italy, the Bulgars started to raid Roman territory in Thrace and Illyricum. This continued until the 560s, when the Avars subjugated everyone, including the Bulgars. The Western Turkic Khanate also had a light influence in Bulgaria in the late 6th century until the early 7th century. Eventually, the Bulgars rose up under Kubrat from the Dulo clan. He united the Onagurs, Bulgars, Kuchugurs, and Utigurs to declare independence from the Avars. In 632, they formed Old Great Bulgaria. They also were likely supported by the Byzantines. Kubrat continued to rule over Old Great Bulgaria up until his death in 665. He had 5 sons who split up the kingdom. The first son, Papayan, was absorbed into the Turkic Khazar Khanate. Next door, in the northern Caucasus in 668, Alsek went into northern Lombard Italy, and the Bulgar identity faded into the Lombard one. Kuba led his fair share of Bulgars into Central Europe under the Avars. The last two, however, are the most important. Kotrag led his people to the Volga River in northern modern-day Russia to avoid the Khazars. In the late 9th century, the Bulgars there made their own country, which was called Volga Bulgaria. The last son, Aspara, led the remaining 30,000 to 800,000 Bulgars into Byzantine Thrace. First, they settled Wallachia in the 670s, then they went south of the Danube, facing against the Byzantines at the Battle of Unglos, also teaming up with the 7 Slavic tribes there in 680. The Byzantines had just come off of the Arabs sieging Constantinople in 678, so they had a large army prepared for the Bulgars. Despite Aspara being outnumbered 1 to 2 by the Eastern Romans, he still won the battle. He formed the First Bulgarian Empire via peace treaty with the Eastern Romans. The empire at first was in Wallachia and at the Pontic steppe. This empire was ruled by the minority pagan Turkic Bulgar elite, while the majority of the empire was Slavic and Christianizing. Aspara is also credited with founding the city of Pliska, the first capital of Bulgaria. Aspara didn't do much for the rest of his reign, and in 700 CE he died in battle with the Khazars. His son, Turvo, succeeded Aspara. After Turvo helped the Eastern Roman Emperor Justinian II regained the throne in 705. Justinian II called Turvo Caesar, or Tsar as the Slavs called it, instead of a Khan. The position of Tsar was just as good as the Roman Emperor back in those days. Turvo also gained the important cities of Stara Zagora and Karnobat. Justinian tried to go back on the truce, but was slashed at the Battle of Anchialus. Turvo was also known for saving the Byzantines at the siege of Constantinople in 717 against another Arab force. Despite being outnumbered by the Arabs, the Bulgarians and Byzantines won, saving Europe from possible Arab invasion. Turvo ended up dying in 721 CE. After Turvo's death, there was a political crisis all across the country over which clan ruled, Julo or Vokil. All of this was an advantage to the Byzantines, especially Constantine V. He beat the Bulgarians at the Battle of Malay and Chialus in 763 and Berzitia. The Bulgarian Empire was at brink of collapse. This might have had a positive side effect for the Bulgarians though. They all started to unite against their common enemy, the Byzantines. Telerik started to defeat the Byzantines, and even tricked them into getting their spies executed in 775. The Eastern Romans were finally ousted at the Second Battle of Masale or Male in 792 by Khan Kadam. The Bulgarian Empire was strengthened back to its power again, and was at its best so far. Khan Krum ascended the throne in 803 and was an amazing ruler for the Bulgarians, but terrible for any kingdom around him. Firstly, he had eliminated the weakened Avar Khanate by 806 CE after a 2-year-long campaign. This effectively took over large swaths of land in Transylvania and modern-day Hungary, east of the Danube River. This also established a border with the Frankish Empire of France. Krum took over Serdica from the Byzantines in 809 CE, which is the modern capital of Bulgaria. The Eastern Roman Emperor Nicephorus was not happy and launched a campaign into Bulgaria that burned down the capital of Pliska in 811 CE. Krum had attempted to negotiate with Nicephorus just a week beforehand, but to no success. Nicephorus, on his way back to Greece, was caught by Krum and killed at the Battle of Varbitsa Pass. After the battle, Krum used Nicephorus' skull as a cup to humiliate the Romans and for some tradition. Krum then went on to take a key port at Mesembria and defeat the Byzantines at the Battle of Versinikia. Krum once again attempted to propose a generous peace offer in 813. The Byzantines attempted to assassinate him, however, and the plundering from Bulgaria continued. Eastern Thrace and Adrianople was seized, bringing the Bulgarians closer to the Roman capital, and Krum even started to make plans to capture Constantinople. He brought 5,000 iron-plated wagons carrying siege equipment like flamethrowers, battle towers, and rams. The Byzantines even started to beg the Franks to help them defend. The Eastern Romans were in luck though, as Krum died unexpectedly on the 14th of April 814. Most likely to a stroke or hemorrhage. The plans were cancelled and a siege on Constantinople never happened. Not only was Khan Krum amazing at military, he was also good at ruling the empire. He issued the first ever known law code that Bulgaria had. meaning crimes like robbery and slander were dealt with more severely. Subsidies and protection to poor Bulgarians were given, and the Bulgarian state became more centralized and stable. I personally think that Krum is the second best king that medieval Bulgaria ever had. He is only behind one king that we will go over in a part 2 to this video. So, this is how Bulgaria became the most powerful country in Europe. From being stateless Slavic and Turkic raiders to being feared by Rome itself. So, whenever this video gets 10 likes, I will release a part 2. See you guys in the next video.